Oh man, the little paper fell in. The little teabag paper is... Oh well. Howdy whalers, and welcome back to Moby Dick Explained. When we last checked in on Ishmael and Queequeg, they were having a big chowder breakfast after a long night of misunderstanding and confusion and chaos centered on Queequeg's Ramadan. But today's a new day, and the boys quickly set out to get Queequeg signed on to the Pequod, which is what happens in chapter 18, His Mark. This is a shorter chapter, and we've talked before about how chapters in Moby Dick can be really long or really short depending on what's going on and what kind of mood Melville's in. And the basic gist is Ishmael takes Queequeg down to the ship and he signs up. Story-wise, that's it. It's not hyper complicated, but like I say with every chapter, there's plenty of stuff for us to talk about and analyze and figure out. As the boys approach the ship, Bildad and Peleg, the ship owners that we've talked to a couple of times before, freak out when they realize that Queequeg is a pagan cannibal. Captain Peleg, what is with all these planes? Is it plane o'clock right now? Is it plane 30? Captain Peleg, in his gruff voice, loudly hailed us from his wigwam, saying he had not suspected my friend was a cannibal, and furthermore announcing that he had let no cannibals on board that craft unless they previously produced their papers. In other words, Queequeg cannot get on the ship unless he can prove to Peleg that he's been baptized into Christianity and left his savage pagan beliefs behind. Ishmael jumps in right here and he does some smooth talking where he says, well, of course Queequeg is baptized, and he's a member of what Ishmael calls the First Congregational Church, which we'll get into in a second. But first, there's an interesting little aside here with Bildad and Peleg. Bildad first asks, well, how long has he been a Christian? Because it doesn't look like long. And Peleg jumps in before Ishmael can reply. No, and he hasn't been baptized right either, or it would have washed some of that devil's blue off of his face. Peleg is talking about Queequeg's tattoos, which we know he's basically covered in. It's worth stopping and highlighting that specific phrase, devil's blue. Even though it's kind of a throwaway little line, it's still reinforcing those underlying themes of whiteness, cleanliness, Christianness, etc. Peleg is showing us that to him, as an exemplar of piety, or translated white Christianity, tattoos, which he's gone so far as to call the devil's blue, are something of a subversion of traditional societal values, or in this case, really specifically, traditional Christian white values. We've been here before. This is going to come up a lot. There's a clear and direct association here between the marks on Queequeg's body and the way society, Bildad, Peleg, Ishmael, us, judge him. It's a small, kind of funny, goofy little line. A baptism's obviously not going to wash your tattoos away, but the devil is in the details. Literally. I hate that joke so much. Is it even a joke? Does it count? Next page. Peleg and Bildad push Ishmael to explain what exactly he means by the First Congregational Church. I mean, sir, the same ancient Catholic Church to which you and I and Captain Peleg there and Queequeg here and all of us and every mother's son and soul of us belong, the great and everlasting First Congregation of this whole worshiping world. We all belong to that. Only some of us cherish some queer crotchets, no ways touching the grand belief in that we all join hands. Everyone on earth is part of an everlasting spiritual world, regardless of the specific ways in which they display that belief, which Ishmael even calls queer crotchets. Crotchet, depending on the dictionary, means a highly specific or individual preference or notion, usually eccentric or strange or perverse. He's saying that the one true belief that's above all the churches and rituals and texts and, rules is that we should all join hands and we're all in this together and we should treat each other as one. And that we are all sort of by default already a part of that church. Peleg likes this sermon so much that he compliments Ishmael and tells him he missed a career as a preacher. And because of it, he lets Queequeg onto the ship, where Queequeg promptly demonstrates his exceptional harpooning skills. Taking sharp aim at it, he darted the iron right over Bildad's broad brim, clean across the ship's decks, and struck the glistening tar spot out of sight. In other words, he jumps up onto the deck and whips a harpoon right by Bildad and hits this tiny little piece of tar, showing how good his aim is, how strong he is, what a great harpooner he is. And of course, because he's such a good harpooner, Peleg and Bildad both forget that they were worried he was some kind of pagan savage, and they just rushed to sign him on. When Ishmael signed on to the Pequod, he was granted the 300th lay through this kind of big production from Bildad and Peleg, where they're kind of playing good cop, bad cop, and they're making it seem like they're negotiating really hard and blah, 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 blah. But you can tell they're kind of taking advantage of him not knowing what's going on. Queequeg, because of his incredible harpooning, is offered the 90th lay, which is way better than Ishmael's. We didn't really get super deep into this when Ishmael signed onto the ship, but the basic gist of a lay is that it's a percentage. So the ship goes out and hunts whales and brings back as much as it can, and then once the costs are paid and the owners and probably some other stuff, whatever's left of the profit is split between the crew members. Ishmael can expect to get 1/300th of whatever's left, compared to Queequeg, who gets 1/90th, which is 3 times as much? Is that right? 3 times? I don't know math, but it's more. It's more. He gets more. Ishmael getting such a bad deal compared to the savage that moments ago couldn't even come on the boat is a reminder of 2 specific things. First, of chapter 16, when we talked about how Bildad, despite being very religious, was also a realist and very familiar with the idea of the limit of your beliefs when put into practice in a real world where you need to make money and survive. Like, sure, he's a pagan and he eats people, but I mean, we're running a business here, and good harpooners are hard to find. Second, it echoes something from chapter 9, the sermon, when Father Mapple is telling us about Jonah's captain and how the way Jonah's captain thinks about a person depends mostly on how much money they have in their pocket. We've talked about this quote before in chapter 9. In this world, shipmates, sin that pays its way can travel freely and without a passport, whereas virtue, if a pauper, is stopped on all frontiers. Queequeg isn't rich, but his skill and his talent provide others with an opportunity to make money. For as long as his revenue-generating skills hold, people like Bildad and Peleg will happily overlook the fact that he's not a Christian. It's funny how that works. All that's really left is for Queequeg to sign the contract. Queequeg can't write in the way that we think about writing, with English letters and words and sentences. So when he's asked to sign his name under the misspelled quahog, he makes a mark, but taking the offered pen, copied upon the paper in the proper place, an exact counterpart of a queer round figure which was tattooed upon his arm. The mark on his arm is core to his identity. The mark on the paper, on his arm, his devil's blue, these are all things that make Queequeg Queequeg. And the concepts of marking and writing are huge in Moby Dick. And like so many other things, we could talk about them forever. We could talk about this chapter forever. But for our purposes today, it's just good to set a mental reminder to kind of sit up and take notice whenever we catch Melville talking about marking or writing or etching our history into the world. One of the ways to interpret Moby Dick as a whole is that the whole thing is about writing, and the whale is kind of a metaphor for the writer's pursuit of the profound. We don't have time to talk about any one of these really specific readings of this text, but if you're curious or you find yourself with a theory or like a rabbit hole, there's tons of other videos and essays and dissertations and articles. There's so much stuff that you can read to find your own version of this. So even if I don't talk about it or I gloss by it or something like that, you should totally deep dive it if you pick up an interesting thread, because that's kind of the joy of the whole thing. Is this book in particular stands up to lots of different types of analyses and interpretations. So, go crazy. With the contracts all signed and the business all taken care of, Bildad, of course, gives Queequeg a pamphlet about Christianity and beseeches him to turn from his dark pagan ways, which brings out a little mischief from Peleg, who we've seen earlier is kind of a saltier, prodding counterpart to Bildad, as he explains that, on trips like this, you might not want to be Christian. Pious harpooners never make good voyagers. It takes the shark out of them. No harpooner is worth a straw who ain't pretty sharkish. There was young Nat Swain, once the bravest boat header out of all Nantucket and the Vineyard. He joined the meeting and never came to good. He got so frightened about his plaguey? I should have looked that up beforehand. Plaguey. He got so frightened about his plaguey soul that he shrinked and sheared away from whales for fear of afterclaps, in case he got stove and went to Davy Jones. Being so focused on the afterlife, especially that grim focus that we talked about in the last chapter, can really kick a fear into somebody. And somebody who lives in fear, whether it's of God or fate or whatever, doesn't really make for a good whaleman. There's some back and forth here between Bildad and Peleg, which, we're used to by now. And Bildad demands that Peleg admit that he turned to the heavens on a particular voyage where they were very close to ruin. Peleg replies he was way too busy worrying about the voyage to worry about the heavens. What? With all three masts making such an everlasting thundering against the side, and every sea breaking over us fore and aft? Think of death and the judgment then? No time to think of death then. Life was what Captain Ahab and I was thinking of, and how to save all hands, how to rig jury masts, how to get into the nearest port. That's what I was thinking of. It just gives us another really great look at this relationship between these old whalemen who've probably been on 100 voyages together, and now they bicker like an old married couple. It also hints at some of the danger we might be encountering on our voyage, and the kind of reaction we might expect to see if something like that does befall the Pequod. That balance of faith and hope and turning your head to the sky when things are going horribly wrong and wondering if maybe, like Jonah, it's all been brought upon you for some kind of reason, with doing what you need to do to survive and saving that spiritual, philosophical conversation for clearer skies. We are going to witness this balancing act, sometimes as a conflict, later on in the book. Bildad heads out to the deck, where he supervises the prep work with his normal sort of puritanical, detail-oriented, waste-nothing posture. There he stood, very quietly overlooking some sailmakers who were mending a topsail in the waist. Now and then he stooped to pick up a patch or save an end of tarred twine, which otherwise might have been wasted. And the boys head out to finish up their last-minute preparations for this voyage, which is going to start really soon. That's it for this time. Next time we're going to read Chapter 19, The Prophet. Until I see you again, please be good, be kind, don't kick any puppies, and thank you for watching. If you're having a fun time on this whaling voyage with me, don't forget to like and subscribe, check out the Patreon and our sticker club and all that stuff, and leave comments. I love reading your interpretations and your experience with Moby Dick. We're all in this together.